Hey guys, welcome to the Electron Academy. My name is Hussein and I'm gonna be your instructor for this Python tutorial series. So this is the first video on our channel, so be sure to give it a like or even subscribe and leave a comment down below as to how I'm teaching and how I can improve my teaching skills as well. So let's get started with the first video. Now, usually what happens is that when a Python newcomer wants to learn how to use the Python programming language, the first thing that they usually do is print hello world on the screen. Now, how do you do that? That's what we're going to be finding out today. So, to follow these tutorials or any tutorials on our channel, you do not require any previous experience unless we specifically specify in the video, or unless there are any previous videos in the series that you haven't watched yet, and we recommend watching those before moving on to the further videos. So this is our first video, and we're going to be learning the Python print function. But before that, we need to cover some common keywords that are going to be used in this video, so just so you don't get confused about what I'm saying. So first of all, a function. Now, a function is a block of organized, reusable code that can be used to perform a single action. So imagine I have 50 lines of code that perform a single action. Now I can compile those 50 lines of code into a function so that I can use those 50 lines of code again and again and again. So I can perform that single action repeatedly again and again. Now, a function call is basically how you call the function. So you already define your function, you have the block of organized code. How are you supposed to call it? What are you supposed to do now? So you use a function call to actually call the function for performing its single action. So in the case of the print function, we don't actually define or create the print function because that's something that's done in as default inside Python. So the print function is default. So all we do is actually call the function. Now, the next thing is arguments. Now, arguments are values that are passed inside function calls. So, imagine we make a function that adds two numbers together. Now, we can put default functions inside the function as well. So, we can make the default numbers 2 and 5, for example. So, if you just call the function normally, it'll just print out 7. We can do that. But what if you want to provide your own numbers? We can do that using arguments. So, we will pass arguments or a value inside the function call, and that will enable the function to use our values or our arguments to execute the function. So we'll see how that works as well. Now we go to data types. So data types are basically the type of data that is being used. So there are many types of data in Python. The two types that we'll be covering in this video are integers or numbers and strings or text. So we'll just be calling them strings and integers. Now, one thing to note over here, integers don't mean all types of numbers. Integers only apply to whole numbers and negative whole numbers as well. They do not apply to decimal points or fractions or anything like that, just so you know. So let's move on to the next one, strings. So strings are a data type that is used for writing text-based values. So what does that mean? Now, normal text that you write in, let's say, a Word document, those are basically strings. So text, normal text or text values are called strings in programming. So you can specify strings and integers as we're going to cover now. So integers, as I said, they're whole number based values. So let's say 3 or -3 or 534, -534. All of these numbers are integers. And you can use integers and strings both inside the print function call, the print function's function call. And we're going to be doing that soon as well. Now, syntax. Now, you may have been hearing about syntax from other programmers. Now, what is syntax? Syntax is basically the way how you write a program. Now, There are many types of syntax. I prefer to categorize them into different types. So there is the beautiful syntax. So if you write it in this way, the code looks nicer and it looks more beautiful. And then there's some kind of syntax where if you don't write it in the way that it's supposed to, the program just won't work. So we're just gonna be concentrating on the beautiful syntax as well as the syntax that actually works, because implementing beautiful syntax from your code since day one is something that's very helpful to you in the future if you want to get hired or just to make your code look neat and clean. So let's move on to the next one, and the last keyword that we're going to be covering in this video: syntax errors. So syntax errors are basically a type of programming error that occurs when you type the wrong syntax. So as I said before, you can get beautiful syntax, you can get not beautiful syntax but it still works, or you can get syntax that just doesn't work at all. So that's what happens when you get syntax errors, is basically wrong syntax, so the program doesn't even run at all. It just doesn't run. So that happens when you type something wrong, not in the way it's supposed to be. And that's the last keyword that we're going to be covering in this video. So now let's actually get to using the print function, and yeah, let's go. Okay guys, so we're back, and now you can see that I'm in my browser right now, and I'm at a website called repl.it. So I recommend that all of you go to this website and sign up for accounts, because this website is a really good website to practice programming, and it also has a command line over here, so you can view your outputs as well. And you write your code over here, and this is where you can import files. And yes, you can use Python with multiple files as well. That's something that we're going to be doing in the future, so get excited for that. And now we're going to be actually using the print function. So first of all, this is how you write the print function. So you write the word print, and without any spaces you put two brackets over here. Now this is how you write the base print function. If I just execute it, now you execute whatever you write inside over here by clicking on this run button. So if I just click on that, you can see that nothing happened over here on the right side, because I didn't really print anything, did I? So now we're gonna be printing things. So there are many things that you can specify in the print function. As I said, in this video we're only gonna be covering two things, and those are numeric values or integers, whole numbers, remember, and text-based values or strings. Now, to enter strings inside Python in the print function, let me just do that real quick. So let me enter the string hello world, okay, and let me run it. So you can see that it outputs an error. Now, why does that happen? But before I get into that, this is how an error in Python actually looks like. So it says file, and then in quotations it says the name of the file, and over here it says .py, which is the file extension you use for Python files. So that's something important to remember. And this main over here is basically the default Python file. So whenever you boot up repl.it, you can see how to create or how to use this website online. Once you sign up, you can just create a new REPL and it'll just appear like mine. So what REPL does basically is that it automatically creates a default Python file called main.py. You can see it over here as well. And that's basically where you do all of your main Python functions. You can create new Python files as well. That's totally possible. You can merge the functions, or you can merge the code from both of the files or multiple files. That's also possible. Something we're going to be doing in the future. So this is the print function over here. Now it says syntax error, invalid syntax. So obviously I did some invalid syntax. Now what happened over here? Now how do you actually figure out where your error is? So imagine if you have a code file of about 50 lines or maybe even 100 lines. How do you find out where your error is? There are two ways to do that. First things first, you can look at this. So it says line number 1. Now if you can see over here, there are lines in all of your code executions. So this is line number 1. So you can just find out where your error is. So it's in line number 1. Line number 1 is right here. And you can see that there's a small arrow here, and that arrow is pointing towards the exclamation mark. Now this arrow won't exactly be accurate to what's going on, but if you have some experience with programming, then you can easily figure out what's going on, because it's going on somewhere over here. So the error is somewhere in this part. What's the error? Now that's what you're gonna see. So that's how errors work, and it also gives you the syntax error that actually happened. So in this case, it was a syntax error. There are other types of errors which we're going to be seeing soon, and this is a syntax error. What was the problem? Invalid syntax. So now we're going to be correcting the syntax. Now if you want to input a string argument, so whatever you put inside of these curly brackets, inside of these normal brackets for this function, for this print function, they're called arguments. So for string arguments, you put them in between double quotation marks like this. So now you can see that they have double quotation marks inside them. So now if I run the command, you can see that it prints out hello world to the command line. And that's basically how you can print out simple strings. But now how about printing out numbers? Now let's just get into that real quickly. Okay guys, now we're gonna go over how we put whole numbers inside this print function. So what if you want to print whole numbers or integers on the screen using this print function? So let me just go ahead and remove the string over here. Now printing out whole numbers or integers is actually very easy, and you can just do that using numbers normally without specifying the quotation marks. So if I make another print function over here and I just write the number 87 like that, so as you can see that you may have noticed colors are changing for a lot of the things that I'm writing over here. That's basically how REPL works, or how most programming text editors work. They specify colors for different things that you write. So functions are usually defined in blue like that, and numeric values, or in this case it's an integer, is defined in the green color, and in red it's specified strings, so strings are specified in red color. So if we just execute this over here, so you can see that we just wrote the print function and we didn't put any quotation marks, and we just wrote the numeric value or the integer that we want to print, 87. Now as you can see, it just printed the number 87 normally, which is good. Now another thing that you guys may be confused about is this over here. So what I basically did is I wrote 87 inside quotation marks, and now let me just run the command over here. It prints out the exact same thing. So why can't I just do this instead of this? So why is that? Now the reason for that is because, well, you have to think logically about this. We wrote the number 87 inside quotation marks. Now whatever you write inside quotation marks becomes text. Now the reason Python keeps numbers, so numbers like 87, and text like 87, in this case 87 because that's what we wrote inside quotation marks, why do we keep strings and integers separate? What's the reason? It's because you can actually do addition with integers, and you can do multiple mathematical functions with integers, and that's why we keep them separate. So whenever you need to specify an integer, never specify it with quotation marks, otherwise in the future you will not be able to do mathematical functions using it. Okay, and it won't really be counted as an integer, it'll just be a string, if you get what I mean. So this is a string, and this is a numeric value or an integer. Keep that in mind and don't get confused. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the last part about print functions, because there's not much you can really do with this function. And the last thing is displaying two things at once. So you may have noticed that over here in the execution prompt or command line, we wrote a print function for hello world, and it printed out hello world. And then we wrote another print function for 87, and you can see that it automatically printed it out on another line. And then we wrote a print function for a string called 87, and that also printed out in the third line. Now, before I move on, one interesting thing to note: why do these both look the same when they print out? Why does that happen? It's because how the print function works is that if you specify numeric values like this, it automatically turns these numeric values into text strings and displays it out. So it doesn't change the value. So if you were to use this value in another function that doesn't convert it to a string, it'll still be regarded as a integer value, and you can still do addition with it. But that's just how the print function works. If you want to print it on screen, it just temporarily converts these integers into strings. So that's how the print function works. But because these two, hello world and string 87, are both strings already, it doesn't need to convert them, so it just displays them directly. So that's how the print function works. Now, what if we want to display hello world and 87 both on one line? What can you do? So you can specify the print function, and first of all specify hello world just as we did before, and then at the end of the quotation marks, but not after the brackets, right here in the middle, you can just specify a comma and a space. And now you can write the second data type that you want to input into this function. So we want to write hello world and 87 right next to each other. So how are we going to do that? We can just write hello world and 87 like this. And now if I run this function over here, it prints out hello world and 87 together in one line. And you can also do this with two strings. You can also do that as well. Now I'm gonna do something tricky over here. I'm gonna write hello in one string, put a comma, and that's the first argument I specified. So this over here and this over here are my first arguments. Then the value after the comma are my second arguments. So over here in this function I put two arguments. One is a string type or a string data type of hello world, and another is a numeric data type or an integer data type of 87. So over here I'm gonna write two text types or two string types. Hello is the first one. The second one is gonna be world. So when I print this out, something interesting is gonna happen. You can see that it prints out exactly like the normal hello world printout, even though I specified two arguments instead of one whole argument, and it's still printed out in exactly the same way. So that's the uniqueness about print functions. You can mess around with it, and you can play around with it as well to see how you can change stuff. And yeah, that's gonna be it for this video, guys. So if you liked it, be sure to leave a like and be considered to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, leave some comments in the description about how we can improve our YouTube channel and how we can improve our teaching skills as well. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.